Again, because of the finish meetings in touch. This is Carrie and Philbin, and she's going to talk to you about Sonic Pie.
So I'm just going to very briefly talk to you about kind of my journey as a teacher, and I'm sure there's some people who are related teachers or training to teachers, and I'm sure there's people who are parents that might be interested in what is happening with education generally, and also children. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten you. You're very important because what you enjoy in class is what I want to teach, right? So it's important to me that you learn something. So I've been trying to teach programming using music over the past year, and how this journey kind of happened was I started when pretty much everyone else started. When the Pi was announced, and when you were able to buy it on the kind of first day, I signed up and I tried to get a Pi and found out very quickly, like everybody else, I was going to have to wait from February till about, mine arrived in May, to actually start doing anything with it. So it arrived, great, I've got this Raspberry Pi, it's for education, so it's going to help me teach programming in school. Okay, let's go find some stuff to do with it. And there was kind of nothing out there. So I went to a Raspberry Jam, because that seemed like there was a lot of noise about Raspberry Jams. It was kind of billed as this place where people were getting together to share what they've been doing with their Pis. And I thought, oh great, so I'll go there and I'll meet all these people who've done some great projects, and together we can turn it into some kind of scheme of work or some way of teaching young people how to program. But that did not happen. I turned up at my first Raspberry Jam, and it was actually not a great experience for me at all. My first Raspberry Jam, I turned up, I was one of only 4 women in a room of about 50 men. And even today, as I kind of looked around, it's very male heavy, male dominated. And I think earlier on when someone was speaking, someone shouted out something like a simple enough for your wife, which, considering what supportive and nice community we are, I was actually very disappointed that happened, even at this late stage in Raspberry Jam kind of time. So my first Raspberry Jam, because I was one of the only women who was there, I was invited to kind of come up and speak. And this was held in the Mozilla offices in London. And if anyone's been to the Mozilla offices, you know, and it's a bit like Google offices in a way, but there's access to kind of food and drink. And it was after school, like everything I do, I give up my free time, what little free time I have to go to events and try and find out as much as I can to improve my own teaching. So it was quite a late afternoon, I'd gone there, it was early evening, and talks were going on and on and on. And as I was listening to the talks, everyone was coming up and explaining what they were doing with the Pi. I was getting more and more irate, because they were all it was kind of like a geek contest. It was like, hey, I've made this, big robot thing, and hey, I've made this cool Super Nintendo, I called it the Super Nintendo, I've done this, I've done that. And they were all it was kind of a geek off. And I thought, not one person who's got up to speak has even mentioned education, and I thought that was the whole point of the Raspberry Pi. So, because I was there with a friend of mine who's called Jenny on the class, so she's also a teacher, and we actually went through our teacher training together. And we were asked to kind of get up and say something. And I thought, yeah, right, I will do then, because I did have access to free drinks, so I was feeling a little bit, confident. So I thought I'd get up and I'd say something, and I got up and said, I thought this was for education, and no offence, I think your projects are wonderful, but I'm not sure how I could take any of those back into the classroom and teach programming. At which point, a man from the back of the room shouted, well, maybe we can get it to go shopping for you.
Oh!
So that was my first experience of the Raspberry Pi community, which, as we all know in this room, is not a fair reflection of the Raspberry Pi community. But that people must be aware that actually being a woman, and it's been said a few times that I am kind of part of the Raspberry Pi community. I'm quite well known in the Raspberry Pi community as a woman. Putting myself out there does actually lead me to being targeted quite negatively for some of the things I'm doing. So please be aware, if you are trying to encourage young girls or women or graduates from university who are women, please take that into consideration, that actually they're putting themselves out there and they're likely to be targeted. So I had this really awful experience at Raspberry Jam. But I've always had this belief that actually the way forward for teaching computing for perhaps ICT teachers who aren't as skilled as they could be is to talk to software developers or people working in industry and academics as well. So I attended PyCon, which is the Python conference in the UK. It wasn't this year, it was the year before. And when I got there, the first talk was actually by Alex Bradbury from the Foundation. And even throughout his talks, I was getting a little bit annoyed that he wasn't mentioning education. So later on, we met up after a few backwards and forwards tweets. He's shaking his head at me at the moment, he's quite annoyed that I mentioned that. We got talking about what could happen, and I actually realised he was really interested in education. So through meeting him, and because he's at Cambridge studying computer science in PhD, he put me in touch with his PhD supervisor, Rob Mullins, who's part of the foundation. And they sent me this really amazing guy called Sam Aaron, Dr. Sam Aaron from Cambridge University. If you don't know him, follow him on Twitter. He's just the most creative person I've ever met. And there's this argument at the moment that computer science is not creative. And I couldn't disagree with that more, and neither did he. So they sent me this guy who I'll talk about later. And together, we managed to get pies into schools through a project called Sonic Pi. Now, you must understand that at this point, and even now, my subject was getting really bad press. It generally gets really bad. Teachers, full stop, we get bad press. But everyone thinks we turn up at 9 o'clock and go home at 3 and we have these lovely holidays. Anyone who's a teacher knows that's not true. I was just talking to someone here who knows that on Monday I was talking at Google, and I'd had such an awful day. When I got up to speak, I wasn't prepared to speak. So I just kind of figured out how awful my day had been, which he reminded me of earlier. Because like I said, I give up my evenings to go and talk or run a workshop. I give up my weekends to do this stuff when I'm doing a full-time job at the same time. So at the moment, ICT and computing lessons are generally getting a bad press. People think that what we do is we teach PowerPoint, we teach Word. I've never, in my career, taught those things. Just say that now. I've never taught those things. I'm not saying it was the perfect subject, but I never taught those things. Right? That's a really outdated and backward view of what our subject was. We are now moving towards a new programme of study, and I do welcome that, and I think it is a good thing. However, there must be an understanding that was never the case. My lessons were never boring. People from COCA, I spoke at Westminster with someone from COCA, the first thing she said was, well, ICT lessons are boring. Well, how dare you? You haven't been in the classroom with me, you don't know that. It's not true. So at this time, there was this perception that ICT was boring, which it's not. So I met Sam Aaron, he came to my school, he took his pie out of his bag, he plugged it into a speaker, and he said to me, I've programmed it to make music. I don't know if this is any benefit to you, or if you think there's a way we could teach computer concepts through it. What do you think? And I thought it was amazing. I thought it was really, really cool. So I said to him, well, if you go away and make a nice little interface for me, and we can get it to do X, Y, and Z, it would work really well, I think, in schools. So together, he created the environment that they would code in, and together we kind of created the lessons as we went along. And that was a really positive experience for me because I actually learned more about programming myself by doing that, and he was the expert. So we call it Sonic Pi, and he's created an application that uses it, and there is a 6-week scheme of work built into that. So if you're a teacher, you're looking for a way to teach programming, this is a really positive and strong way. And what I really like about it is I always wanted something that would take my students from scratch, which is a very visual programming language, but that would be a stepping stone before perhaps something like Python. So in year 7 we teach Scratch, in year 8 we teach Sonic Pi, in year 9 we move on to Python. So I feel like there's a nice transition between the three. And this is kind of that stepping stone in the middle. It's really good for workshops as well. I've run quite a few workshops using it. And so far they've all been really positive, the kids have really enjoyed it. And so I guess at this point is where I'm supposed to switch and show you actually what it looks like, which is really scary because this thing doesn't. So, to my Pi. And again, this is really difficult. I'm not used to turning around and doing this. I'm used to just come on. Yes. Okay, so this is what the environment looks like when you load Sonic Pi. Really good news is you're using one of the latest versions of Raspberry and it's already built in. So you don't have to download it as a central program, it's already built in. It's under the education, if you're looking for it. And when you load it, you have an interface that looks like this. So the main screen is for your programming. On the right hand side, there is an output to let you know what's happening when it's playing. And also, if you've generated any errors, they'll come out at the bottom. At the moment, the errors are a bit wordy. We're trying to simplify them a little bit. But it's using a version of Ruby, kind of hacked version of Ruby, but it is Ruby to program in. So the reason why we use Ruby is because it's got really nice syntax. So words like play kind of mean something. So if I type play 60, there's a really difficult. And it will play a note. So we were able in the first lesson to teach sequencing very easily by doing something like this, and then asking the students what they think will happen. So I'm sorry, young people, I'm going to pick on you like an awful teacher right now and say, what do you think is going to happen if I play this now?
It's going to make a 3 true.
Okay, so do you think it's going to play boom, 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 or do you think it's going to go boom like that? You know the answer, so you put your hand down. So I'm so what do you think? It's okay, doesn't matter. Well, if I play it now, what will happen is it will sound like it's playing them all at the same time. Because the computer is following a set of instructions. It is playing one after the other, but obviously the computer's doing it so fast, it sounds to us like it's playing them all at the same time. So what I can do in between those notes is I can add an extra instruction. Move. So that it adds a kind of pause in between. So kids love this in my class. I only have to show them this bit, they've gone for the rest of the lesson. Right, so it kind of spaces them out a bit. And we can change the values and all that stuff. And kids, like, they have headphones, and literally it's silent for the rest of the lesson. Which is really cool. And from that we can move on to kind of iteration. We can show things how to iterate it. And it's got really nice syntax again, because it's just like 3 dot times do. We can introduce indentation and stuff like that, all those stuff like that. So we can add extra functionality later on. We can do data structures as well, which is fun. Okay, this one. And because it's using those numbers that are up there, those notes, it's actually based on a MIDI keyboard of numbers. So actually what you can do, you can just Google the MIDI keyboard note numbers and you can use them, and then you can map that to a tune like I did. That's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I just worked out what they were. So it was like A, B, G, 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 whatever they were. Just translated them into MIDI note numbers. And that's how I was able to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And I know a few people who have taken this and they've made some really amazing songs. Like someone did Eleanor Rigby, someone did like Bumblebee. You know. People have done some really cool stuff with it. And this is kind of like my NBA moment. So I was at Google all week, and when Google are about to tell you something that they don't want you to go outside and tell anyone else about, a bit like what Google was doing earlier on when he lifted up that thing that he told us not to tell anyone about. Sort of. And this is kind of like my NBA moment. So at the moment, Sonic Pi gives you that functionality. You can change some of the tunes, but that's mainly it. Sam's been working on a new version of Sonic Pi that's got some extra functionality, which I'm going to show you now, which is quite fun. So before the kind of sounds are built in, what Sam has done is he's added samples, and they're just WAV files. So what it means is any teacher or any parent and student who's got access to Audacity, which is free download, or any way of recording music, they can just export that as a WAV, transfer it, and they can actually use those as samples, which makes it even more interesting, I think.
Between the train and 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 the train and the platform.
So that's quite cool, right? There's a few built in. Let's see what I've got there. It's just going to do. This sort of normally breaks the pie, but yeah. It's like lots of cows moving there. So that's quite fun. And so far for us, it's been a really successful scheme of work, not only in the lessons that I was teaching, but we were concerned that obviously it was successful because Sam and I were in the room and it was our kind of thing. So we sent the lessons up to Manchester and they were into about 3 schools and they were all taught in these 3 schools. And again, the results were very similar. It was very successful. The reason why I noticed it's so successful, not just in my own classroom, is because I had a very high ability set and a low ability set, and this ability is based on literacy rather than anything else. And we all know that that's not always the best judge of whether someone is intelligent or not, right? Because I'm dyslexic. So I have low literacy skills, but I would still consider myself being intelligent in other areas. And it wouldn't be surprised to note that bottom set group did very, very well. In fact, I had an amazing moment, I keep calling it my Ofsted moment, when I had my lesson objectives on the board about how they were learning about iteration and what that meant. And a member of SLT walked into my classroom, so one of the senior leaders at my school, and he went up to one of the girls, who normally is quite disinterested by my subject, or I had been in the past, and said to her, "What are you doing?" And she explained, and she used all the right terminology. She explained what was happening with her code. She changed some of it, and explained what would happen if she changed it. You know, it's this amazing thing that happened. Of course, Ofsted weren't there to see that. Didn't see that at all, but it was wonderful, and it shows that we can engage young people with computer science, and it can be creative. It's not this dull subject. And I have taught this at workshops I did like the National Museum of Computing. I've done them in my local libraries, and it's been really, really popular. So I'm hoping to do one here at the next Jam. So that should be fun. If not, go away and come and go yourself. And the benefits from this approach is that it did engage both genders. It allows sort of freedom and creativity to take control. We always say they're kind of learning computer science as an accident, really, as a kind of, because they're making this music. The whole point of it, they're supposed to make this track, this electronic track, and as a side effect, they're learning computer science, and they really enjoy that. And that scheme of work is available. It's free. You know, download it. The software is free. Download it. Have a go. You'd be surprised how much fun it can be. If you want to find out more, I run a channel. Now, it's probably what I'm most famous for. I have a YouTube channel called Geek Girl Diaries, in which I try to teach computing to children, to young people, particularly targeting girls in its branding, but it is for anyone. I have a whole video on this. I know Alex Eames on Last Client TV, he's really got a really good one as well. And as everybody knows, I have just released a book, and there is a chapter on this in the book. This isn't a plug to say buy my book. There are lots of good books out there. Please go and look at all of them. This has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. To teach all day, come home late evenings, and then work on this, and then do the same thing next day, the next day, next day. You know, regularly. This week I haven't been home before 7:30 every single night. And I get into work at 7:30 in the morning. And that's just an average day for me. So this has been the hardest thing that I've ever done. So please, when you're picking it up, don't see it as like I'm trying to sell myself, I'm trying to sell Raspberry Pi, I'm trying to just sell computer science. And say that if you don't know where to start, then this, if you're interested in Minecraft, there's a little bit of stuff that will tell you where you can go further with that. Or if you're interested in learning a bit more about electronics, and there's a little bit about electronics, maybe find out something else. You know, it's not the definitive guide, it's just a starting point. And my friend's dog loves it, as you can see. So. If you want to get in touch with me or talk to me about any of this stuff, then please come and speak to me after. I know we're conscious of time, so perhaps if you've got any questions, come and speak to me afterwards. That would be great. It was nice to see you. Thanks a lot.